Hello. In today's class, I am going to explain what the TrialTwin platform is and how we use this platform to simulate clinical trials using synthetic health data. And I am your host, Jose Lacal. Today's class is a little bit longer, so please stick with me. And then what we're going to cover is, number one, the problem that we tackle with TrialTwin is that most companies need to test and validate early and often without restrictions. What we see is working with companies in the pharma and medical devices space that they need to test all their processes before they go into production, and then there is a need for synthetic data to represent the customers, the processes, the products, and even the market conditions. As we know, it's not easy to find real data, and specifically in the healthcare space. There are privacy regulations, there are security issues, there are limitations in terms of what the internal data can be reused for, and many times this real data doesn't address all the proper corner cases needed for full-blown testing and validation. And finally, real data is obviously very expensive to acquire and to safeguard. What we are going to present today is that we build fake but very realistic synthetic data. This data is not totally random, but rather follows what we call the patterns of reality. So there is a match between our synthetic data and reality, real life. Okay. So how we solve the problem of testing clinical trials is through the TrialTwin platform. It's an integrated solution that helps all the staffers within a life science companies to design, test, and validate their entire processes. We do this by generating realistic synthetic data throughout the process, from project kickoff to submission. The benefits of this integrated solution is that, number one, you have faster study startup. You can test and validate the processes before first patient in. We can also easily accommodate protocol changes, and the synthetic data is unrestricted and available at large scale. I want to emphasize that this platform was designed specifically for sponsors, and everything in this platform is designed to fit within your existing processes. We focus on driving operational innovation. We obviously cannot accelerate the actual science. All the other processes, we try to accelerate them. Okay, so the agenda for this class is, number one, I'm going to explain how TrialTwin is a clinical trial simulator. Step two, how we see the future of clinical trials. In the third section, I'm going to cover what's the current state of data flows. Step 4 is full details of the TrialTwin platform, how we use synthetic data to accelerate analysis and test, and then finally, how we deliver value as a company. Okay, let's dive in. The mental analogy that I use with customers is that they need to see TrialTwin as a trial simulator. Think of this as a racetrack. So in this analogy, running a clinical trial is similar to racing a sports car in a professional racetrack. What this means is that there is a well-known predictable road ahead determined by the regulatory agencies. There are many twists and turns, hills and dips. This is highly regulated, obviously for safety reasons, and the goal as well in a race, in a car race as well as in a clinical trial, the goal is to finish the race in one piece and on time. Okay, so throughout this presentation, keep this in mind. Your clinical trial, your study is a race car, and it's running on a well-known racetrack. Therefore, what we do with TrialTwin is we build this as a clinical trial simulator, where you can go faster by staying within the guardrails. Something like this. If your study is the car, the race car, and the clinical trial process is the racetrack, we give you this simulator where you can take the protocol, and that becomes the single source of truth, and we build the entire study with synthetic data. We give you an end-to-end simulation using the protocol as the starting point. We generate pre-built data from vendors. We generate the draft report files. We build custom dashboards per study. In a sense, this is an end-to-end simulation of the study. Before you even start the study, and non-technical people can use this simulator. That's the end goal. Okay. So why do we do it this way? And here's where this is our opinion of what's the future of clinical trials. Number one, we see a lot of new market requirements, smaller cohorts, smaller markets, distributed subjects, the whole concept of distributed clinical trials, the need for faster submission. Again, COVID changed a lot of the expectations from the market as well as regulators, the need for cheaper operation, and also an explosion in terms of multiple trial-specific data sources. Overall, we see that clinical trials going forward must follow a human-centered clinical trial design principle. At the same time, we see the need for higher sponsor centricity. Specifically, non-CRF data streams will increase. Sponsors need to have more real-time visibility over data, and there needs to be a faster response to changes mid-trial. And we believe that sponsors need to have more control and management over the central data repository. At the same time, going back to the analogy of the racetrack, there are many standards in place. We want to reduce the friction caused by those standards by building what we call computable standards, where both the internal as well as the regulatory standards are turned into executable rules to increase the speed to ingest, to distribute the data. And obviously we want to give our customers the ability to focus on value add, not just transcoding data from one place to the next. So that's our opinion of the future of clinical trials. So how can we get sponsors there? And that's where we started by taking a step back, and we work with a very large pharma company to analyze the current state of their data flow. So we conducted multiple interviews across functional areas, and the following diagrams are our understanding of the typical study data flows. We jointly identified many repetitive, burdensome, costly, and time-consuming steps. So let's start. So number one, think of this swim lane as the preparation. So the trial design work should obviously follow the standards, as we said, both internal as well as external. The metadata repositories may not contain all the required information, and it's often difficult to install and manage these systems. So just because there is a metadata repository does not mean it has all the required metadata for the studies. And then the second item that we identified is that control terminology management is often a logistical challenge. Sometimes there are spreadsheets floating around, multiple websites, multiple databases. So again, there is no single source of truth sometimes. The next step is the preparation of the study. On average, it takes 60 days to build the study database, and that's based on some industry reports. And the other item that we find concerning is that a lot of the sponsors' knowledge and internal rules are often tied to specific EDC vendor, meaning if a sponsor is using specific EDC vendor 1 to execute the studies and collect the data, a lot of the sponsors' know-how is embedded into how EDC vendor 1 implements things, so that if a sponsor wants to move to EDC vendor 2, there will be a significant uplift to recode those rules into the format of EDC vendor number 2. So for us, that's an issue. Step number 3 is once the study starts rolling and the data comes in, there are multiple transformations of the data. There are multiple vendors, and there's an increasing number of non-CRF data sources coming in, and then the sponsor's data repository must be robust and stable enough for this exploding size of data storage needs. So the data is coming in. Sometimes old technology may not be suitable for this tsunami of data coming in. Then the global safety teams need access to real-time data. and there also the need to build vendor-independent CTMS to EDC interfaces. Again, part of the challenge here are these vendor-specific interfaces that can lead to a sponsor being locked into a specific tool vendor. Also, sponsors increasingly are required to ingest new data types: electronic health records, EHR, EMR, direct data capture from consumer devices, iWatch, for example, as well as real-world data and real-world evidence. And all this data, again, has to be transcoded, polished, changed, modified, reformatted, and put into the repository that the sponsor controls. So all of this needs to go into that repository. Sometimes the CRO controls the data, other times the sponsor controls the data repository. And then once the data is in that repository, somehow there are additional transformations for the internal data consumers to have access to that data. In some cases, the data needs to be transcoded into CDISC formatted data streams, ADAM, SDTM, or there can be sponsor-specific formats used internally. One of the challenges is that sometimes the same data is transformed multiple times by different consumers at different times. So different groups within the sponsor may have access to different ages of data when they make decisions. And obviously, it's difficult to generate new data formats as required, because you have all this data coming in from hundreds of vendors, multiple non-CRF sources, one or many CROs, and then you have dozens of internal consumers. The next step is there is a need to build trial-specific dashboards and then reports based on the trial parameters. Sometimes this is done by hand, and that's obviously very time-consuming. And it's also difficult to keep in sync with the protocol changes, because sometimes in the middle of the study there's a change to the protocol, and then there has to be a mechanism to track that that change ripples through everything in the process, in the flow. And then finally, once the study completes, there are more transformations to build regulatory compliant datasets, ADAM, SDTM, anything else that may be required. So again, it's another step of transformation. And there is a process of manually creating the CSR, the TLF, and other regulatory related documents. So in a sense, based on the research we conducted, there are multiple data transformation steps, multiple people need access to the same data in real time, and there are multiple data consumers that are performing their own transformations to meet their business needs. That's where we are. And here's where TrialTwin comes in. What we are offering is a single platform, an integrated data platform that provides faster, simpler processes and helps reduce all of this expensive and repetitive reprocessing. Our goal is to speed up time to decision making and to ensure that everybody uses fresh and current data. So let me walk you through these steps. It's important to notice that, as I said at the beginning, our goal is to give the sponsor control. Everything we do is geared towards giving sponsor control and giving them the ability to manage the data more effectively, more efficiently. So step one is we start with a computable protocol. What we mean by this is we take the protocol from the sponsor, we programmatically parse everything, and then we use that as the model that we use to build everything else. So think of this protocol as the design of the race car. Again, so we need to have these tires, this aileron, these wings, whatever, one passenger, two passengers, and based on that, we build everything else. So our goal is to eliminate e-paper and using this protocol within our simulator to provide strict and soft racetrack guardrails. So the racetrack is the clinical trial processes. We guide you through those processes. Okay, so next step is we build an execution engine. What this is this is a non-proprietary tool using purely open source tools, where we built an extensible rules engine. And then with this run execution engine, anybody within the sponsor can build, run, and review the entire study. They can simulate the entire study even before first patient in. They can tune the parameters and then run fast simulations. Make a change, run the whole study, see the results, synthetic data again, run it again. The next step is in stage 3, we focus on a sponsor control data repository. As I said, our focus is sponsor centricity, and we want to work with the sponsor to build a permanent local storage where, using industry standard formats and an industry standard engine, we can have a coherent data model across the trials so that then the data is accessible on a very long-term basis. So this will be the single source of trial data truth. Take the protocol, use the execution engine, store everything in the sponsor control data repository. Stage 4, we build ingestion and extraction APIs, application programming interface. What this means is that using the computer protocol, we built models of how to ingest data from external sources. And this could be hundreds of different labs and data providers, could be interfaces to EMRs, interfaces to real-world data. What we do here is we programmatically and very quickly build a connector to all of those data sources, and we can also generate synthetic data to simulate all of those data sources. So this is part of what's called extract, transform, and load, ETL. We build this programmatically based on the protocol. And then on the other side, we build an output, an extract API that will take the data that's in the central repository in whatever format it is, and then it will generate the export in a format that is easy to consume by the internal data consumers. So with this, the user can build the entire study, simulate the input data, and then simulate the output data that's consumed internally. The next stage is, using the protocol, we then interface with the EDC and we build the study. Our platform is EDC agnostic, so we can build the study with build the CRF forms with folders, whatever structure is needed inside that specific EDC. Then we load synthetic data to meet all of the parameters of each of these CRFs, and then we test the forms. We do user acceptance testing through robotic process automation, RPA, and we run through all of the defined patient journeys. This is all automated, so you don't have to have individuals manually entering test patients and then testing all the forms and all the edit checks and all the rules. This is fully automated. The goal here is to eliminate kappas, to make sure that we test every possible variation and that what you expect the EDC to do is actually what the EDC does. The next step is stage 6. We have programmatic data ingestion. We're able to manage inflows from the EDC, just like we can enter synthetic data into the EDC. We can extract data from the EDC. And using the protocol, we have this data ingestion that is based on the definitions of each of the vendors, each of the labs, each of the EHR providers. Okay, so and this also allows us to create synthetic data from all of these sources. That will be very useful for testing. The next step is stage 7 is we convert all of the data that's inside the repository in a real-time basis for internal consumers. And here we can generate whether an SDTM, ADAM, or a sponsor-specific output format. Okay, so the goal is the data is in the repository, all the data consumers get real data, and the goal is we transform once, we transform early, we transform often, and this is fully automated. So no more SAS scripts, no more custom coding, it's all driven through the API. And we also generate the final ADAM and SDTM files. Once the time comes, you just hit a button and we say, okay, give me all the final files, and here are the ADAM files and all of the SDTM domains. The next stage is, using the protocol, we can generate draft documents of a lot of these documents that are needed. For example, the TLF and the CSR. Using the computable protocol at the source, we can use that protocol to build consistent standard templates that will then be used to accelerate the process of writing all of these documents at the end. And then the final step is we're not there yet, but we want to get to the point where we offer a unified data review platform that is driven from the protocol, has a single source of truth, the data repository, with total traceability and full audit trails, where all the data consumers can see data in real time their way. Initially, we're populating this with synthetic data that we generate, but the goal is to build this platform where once everything is tested and validated, the synthetic data is eliminated, and then real data can come in, and the same platform can be used in production with real patient data. Okay, so that's the platform we are building. The next step is, so why us? What value do we bring to the table? The value that we bring is that this is done for you synthetic data. You can use our synthetic data to build and test what we call alternative realities. You can use our synthetic and scientifically accurate and realistic synthetic data to test all of your processes and all of your procedures. We generate this data for you based on your specs. You can use our synthetic data safely. This is not real data, so you can do whatever you want with it. Securely, there's no problem if this data leaks. Privately, nobody will know that you are using this data. Quickly, we can generate massive numbers of data very, very quickly. Obviously, inexpensively. Synthetic data is a lot cheaper than acquiring real patient data. And you can use the same synthetic data repeatedly as you test and you modify your software and your processes, and consistently. Again, you take this digital synthetic cohort and you run it multiple times through your systems. And you can use this synthetic data at scale. We call these reality composers. We help you build end-to-end alternative scenarios. Remember the racetrack, where you can build, run, evaluate, adjust, and rerun, just like in a car simulator. What we build as a company is what we bring to you as a company is the ability to execute this immediately. We have strong domain expertise. We have a passion for data and software. We have over 20 years experience handling open data, 15 years in the health IT space. We're solely focused on the life sciences space. We have a dedicated in-house team. We're all employees of the company, of database software engineers, large-scale systems expertise, and we can also create custom file formats to fit your needs. Our technology differentiators: number one, we never touch the real data, so that this is not, we don't take real data and extract patterns from there. We go the other way. We generate scientifically accurate synthetic data without ever touching your own internal data. And this data acquisition is extensible, so that we can add other open data sources based on your needs. We also enrich open data. So for example, when we take real world data from the FDA, we harmonize all the names and we cross-reference open data. So what we have is we use open data to build a unified view of across agencies, and then we use that data to build this synthetic health data. Okay, you can contact us here, and if you have any question or you need free samples or you would like to see a live demo, please contact us. Thank you.